The Cross estate glittered beneath the soft glow of 1,000 golden lights. Tonight, it was the epicenter of power where the elite gathered alliances were forged and destroyed, and whispers carried more weight than weapons. Naomi stood on the balcony, a glass of champagne trembling. From afar, she appeared flawless, the epitome of grace, beauty, and unshakable strength. But inside her chest tightened with a storm she could neither name nor tame. Her reflection in the glass caught the faintest tremor of uncertainty in her eyes, emerald irises that concealed secrets even she was not yet ready to face. The silk of her evening gown clung perfectly to her figure, but no elegance could shield her from the danger lurking beneath the glittering surface of the night. Somewhere behind her, a familiar presence approached. His name alone was enough to set entire rooms into silence. Alexander moved like gravity itself, the heir to an empire built on shadows and steel, and Naomi had long learned that resisting him was as futile as resisting a storm. "Why are you hiding out here?" His voice, low and velvety, brushed against her like the whisper of a dangerous promise. Naomi didn't turn. "I'm not hiding. I'm breathing." He stepped closer, his cologne wrapping around her dark amber and the faintest hint of smoke. "Breathe later," he murmured. "Tonight, we need to be united. Eyes are watching." She glanced up at him, her lips curving faintly into something between defiance and surrender. "United," she repeated softly. "Funny. I didn't realize cages came with wedding vows." His jaw tensed, but his voice remained controlled, a sharp edge beneath the silk. "This isn't about control, Naomi. It's about survival." Before she could respond, the orchestra shifted to a quieter melody, and the master of ceremonies announced the arrival of a guest no one expected. Delgado. The air thickened instantly. Conversations faltered. Glasses paused mid-air, and subtle glances rippled across the room like sparks catching dry leaves. Delgado, the man whose name was synonymous with manipulation, strode into the ballroom with a predator's ease, his dark suit tailored with surgical precision. He smiled like a man who already owned the room. "Alexander." He greeted, his voice smooth but dangerous. "I would have thought you'd invite me personally." Alexander's hand found Naomi's waist, protective and possessive at once. "I didn't invite you," he replied flatly. "Ah, but I come bearing gifts," Delgado said, raising a glass. "And truths." Naomi's breath caught at the word truths. Delgado motioned toward the massive LED display on the far wall, and suddenly the lights dimmed. The music stopped. Every head in the room turned as the screen flickered to life. At first the footage was grainy, an old recording perhaps decades old. Then the camera steadied, revealing a woman Naomi recognized instantly. Her mother. Naomi's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering silently against the marble floor. Her mother sat in a candle-lit room, pale and fragile, but composed. Across from her sat an older man in an obsidian suit, the Cross family crest, glimmering faintly under the flickering light. "I agree," her mother whispered hoarsely, signing a document with a trembling hand. "But she must never know. Naomi can't see the truth until it's too late." Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Naomi's breath lodged in her throat, her vision blurring at the edges. She didn't notice Alexander stiffening beside her, or Delgado's slow, poisonous smile. The recording ended abruptly. Silence swallowed the room, and then Delgado delivered the blow with surgical precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, his gaze locking on Naomi. "Your precious Naomi is not a true Bandari." The words sliced through her like ice. For a moment, Naomi forgot how to breathe. Not a true Bandari. It didn't make sense. Her entire life identity and loyalty all built on a name that now felt like glass in her hands. Alexander turned toward her slowly, his expression unreadable, but his grip tightening. "Naomi," he said lowly, almost cautiously. "Is this true?" She shook her head, her voice breaking as she whispered, I don't know." Delgado stepped forward, his smile a perfect weapon. "Poor girl," he murmured, feigning sympathy. "Didn't your precious Alexander tell you? Your mother signed away your future long before you could walk." "Enough." Alexander snapped, his voice slicing through the tension. "Say one more word. Delgado and I swear." Delgado raised a hand casually. "Swear what? That you'll protect her. That you'll keep her safe from the truth." He leaned forward slightly, eyes glittering like obsidian. "Alexander, my friend, you can't protect someone from blood. Blood always speaks." Naomi wanted to scream, to deny everything, to demand answers, but her body refused to move. Her mother's trembling voice still echoed in her mind. She must never know. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Whispers, gasps, accusations tossed like blades. Naomi turned on her heels and walked away, her heels striking the marble floor with sharp, uneven clicks. She needed air, space, anything but this suffocating storm of power games and half-truths. Alexander followed his strides, long and purposeful. Naomi stopped. He ordered, grabbing her wrist as they entered the quiet corridor outside. She spun around, eyes blazing with something raw and fragile. "Stop!" she spat softly. "You knew." "I didn't. Please don't lie to me." Her voice cracked, her chest rising and falling in ragged waves. "You knew something, Alexander. That's why you never talk about my mother. That's why you never answer when I ask about the Cross archives." He froze, his silence louder than any confession. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes, but she forced them back, refusing to break. "Not here. Not now." "Tell me the truth," she whispered. Alexander's jaw clenched. "I don't have the whole truth yet. But Delgado is playing you, Naomi. He's twisting something real into something dangerous. Something real," she repeated bitterly. "So part of it is genuine." The air between them turned electric thick with unspoken fears and unhealed wounds. Alexander stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near growl. "I need you to trust me, Naomi." She laughed bitterly. "Trust you. You, the man who keeps cages disguised as protection." His hand tightened on her wrist, his eyes dark and wild. "I am protecting you. From them. From Delgado. From the council. From everyone who would use you if they knew what you really are." "What am I really?" Naomi whispered. "Then tell me, Alexander. Please tell me what I am." His silence was answer enough. She pulled free from his grip, her heels echoing against the marble, as she walked away without looking back. But inside her heart whispered truths she couldn't yet accept. She didn't know who she was, but knew who she didn't want to lose. From the shadows of the corridor, Delgado watched with a wolfish grin. He whispered to his assistant, "Let her question him. Let the cracks widen. A queen without a crown is easier to break." Then he glanced down at his phone, tapping a single message to an unknown number. Phase 1 complete. She doubts him. Somewhere far from the glittering lights of the Cross estate, an encrypted device blinked once, then twice. The real game had only just begun. When trust begins to bleed, even love can turn into a weapon. The rain had begun before dawn. Soft at first, then relentless. The kind of rain that soaked through skin and bones, washing away the fragile illusions people clung to. Naomi sat alone in the library of Cross Estate, the dim firelight brushing across her pale face. The storm outside seemed almost quiet compared to the one roaring inside her. Every tick of the grandfather clock was a reminder of the truth she didn't yet know, and the one she feared most. Delgado's words still echoed through her mind. Your precious Naomi is not a true Bandari. A single sentence, and everything she thought she knew about herself began to crumble. The heavy door creaked open behind her, and she didn't need to turn to know it was Alexander. His presence was gravity impossible to ignore. He stopped a few steps away, saying nothing, unsure how close he could stand. You didn't sleep, he said, his voice low, cautious. Naomi didn't look up from the flickering flames. Did you? No. Silence stretched between them like an unspoken wound. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut. You knew something, didn't you? Alexander hesitated, his jaw tightening. I suspected, he admitted carefully, but I didn't want to believe it. Her fingers clenched the armrest of the chair. And yet you said nothing. I was trying to protect you. She turned her head slowly, finally meeting his gaze, cold emerald locking with storm gray. From the truth. He stepped forward, crouching slightly so they were level. His voice rough now. From them. From Delgado. From the council. There are forces at play you can't yet understand. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. And what am I to you, Alexander? A partner, a pawn, or a liability? He flinched almost imperceptibly, but didn't answer. And that silence. It was worse than any confession. Naomi rose from the chair, her gown whispering against the marble floor. If you can't tell me the truth, she said softly, I'll find it myself. And she left the room without another glance. Far from Cross Estate, Delgado sat in a penthouse overlooking the city skyline, swirling whiskey lazily in a crystal glass. His assistant, a slender man with a scar across his jaw, entered quietly. She doubts him, the man reported. Delgado's lips curved into a smile, sharp enough to draw blood. Good. Doubt is the crack where control seeps in. He set his glass down and leaned forward, tapping his fingers against a folder stamped classified. Prepare the next move, Delgado ordered. Send her the letter. Make her believe it came from her mother. The assistant hesitated. And if she confronts Alexander? Delgado's smile deepened. Perfect. Let love burn. The more they fight, the weaker they both become. Outside, thunder rolled across the city like distant war drums. That night, Naomi returned to her room, only to find an envelope on her dressing table, sealed with crimson wax. Her breath caught as she recognized the handwriting on the front. It was delicate, elegant, and unmistakable. Her mother's. Hands trembling, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. My dearest Naomi, if you are reading this, then the shadows have already reached you. You are in danger, not because of who you are, but because of what you carry. There are truths your father died to protect. Trust no one, unquestioningly, not even those you love. Follow the path to the lake beneath the old oak. There you will find what they tried to bury. The letter ended abruptly, as though torn from a larger page. Naomi stared at the words, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. 1,000 questions crashed against her skull. Why hadn't Alexander shown her this? Why did Delgado seem to know more about her life than she did? Her decision was instant. She had to see the lake. The estate grounds were silent beneath the weight of the storm, as Naomi made her way toward the lake. The wind tore at her coat, the hem catching on branches and wet earth, but she didn't slow down. The ancient oak stood like a sentinel, its gnarled branches clawing at the sky. Beneath it, the ground was soft, like something had once been buried there. Naomi knelt, her fingers brushing the damp soil until they struck metal. She dug frantically, unearthing a small iron box. Inside lay a photograph and a worn pendant, shaped like an infinity loop. The photo showed her mother standing beside a man Naomi didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, his storm-gray eyes hauntingly familiar. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, were 4 chilling words: "Find the blood pact." Naomi's hands shook as she clutched the pendant, unaware that someone was watching her from the shadows. By the time she returned to the estate, Alexander was waiting in her room, his expression thunderous. "You left," he said coldly, holding up the damp letter. "At night. Alone. You went through my things." Naomi demanded, her voice trembling with equal parts fury and heartbreak. "I went through your things, and he snapped because I found your window open and your bed empty." She took a deep breath, steadying herself before replying. "Then you should stop treating me like a prisoner." Alexander closed the distance between them in a single stride, his voice low, dangerous. "You think Delgado wants you alive, Naomi. You feel the council will protect you if they learn what you are. They'll use you, and when you're no longer helpful, they'll erase you." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "And you? What will you do with me, Alexander?" He froze at the question, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "I'll protect you," he said, softer now, almost pleading, "even if it means protecting yourself from yourself." Naomi's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but Delgado's shadow stretched longer with every passing hour, poisoning her certainty. The next day, whispers of Naomi's supposed betrayal circulated in the council. Delgado had planted the seed, and it was already taking root. Alexander attended an emergency meeting, his knuckles white around the edge of the obsidian table. "She's compromised," one council member sneered. "Remove her before she compromises you." Alexander's jaw clenched. "Touch her, and I'll burn this entire council to the ground." A tense silence followed. Delgado smiled faintly from across the table, leaning back as if watching a game he'd already won. That evening, Naomi confronted Alexander again. "Why didn't you tell me about the council?" she demanded. "What do they think of me? I wanted to shield you. I don't need your shield." Her voice broke, and for the first time tears streaked her cheeks. "I need your trust, Alexander." He said nothing for a long moment, then stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. She resisted at first, her fists pressed against his chest. But when his breath warmed her ear, his voice ragged, she felt the storm within her soften, if only for a heartbeat. "Trust me," he whispered. "Just trust me, one more time." Later that night, Delgado received a message. She found the pendant. He smiled darkly, swirling his glass once more. "Good," he murmured. "Let her think she's uncovering the truth. Soon she'll learn what the blood pact really means. And it'll be too late by then." Somewhere deep within Cross Estate, Naomi held the pendant tightly against her chest, unaware that her next choice would change everything for her Alexander and the entire world that lived beneath their shadows. Some loves are dangerous, but some dangers are worth dying for. The Cross Estate slept beneath the silver veil of moonlight, but Naomi lay awake, her mind a labyrinth of unanswered questions. The letter from her mother, the pendant, and Delgado's poisonous games, tangled into knots she couldn't unravel. Yet beneath all the chaos, one truth pulsed louder than the rest. Alexander kept something from her, and secrets Naomi knew had teeth. It was near midnight when Alexander returned from the council meeting. His suit jacket was missing, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, shadows etched deep beneath his storm-gray eyes. Naomi sat curled up on the velvet chaise by the window, knees drawn to her chest, the pendant clutched tightly in her hand. He paused at the doorway, studying her silently. For a moment, The mask slipped, exhaustion and vulnerability flickered across his features before he forced them back behind steel. "You're awake," he said quietly. She lifted her gaze, her voice soft but steady. "I couldn't sleep." He crossed the room, loosening his tie, but Naomi noticed the stiffness in his shoulders, the tension in every controlled movement. "What did the council say?" she asked. Alexander hesitated. "Nothing that concerns you." Her heart ached at the dismissal. "Everything concerns me, Alexander. You can't shut me out anymore." He turned sharply, his hand gripping the edge of the desk, as though anchoring himself. "I'm shutting you out to keep you alive, Naomi." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Naomi rose slowly, her bare feet silent against the marble floor as she stepped toward him. "Alive," she whispered. "Is that all you want for me?" "Survival." He met her gaze, his jaw tense, his voice low and rough. "I want you to be safe." "But safe isn't living, Alexander." She murmured the words, trembling between them. "Safe isn't freedom. And right now I feel like nothing more than a pawn on someone else's board." His expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "You're not a pawn," he said, his voice almost broken. "You're the reason I'm willing to burn this entire world if I have to." Naomi's breath caught her heartbeat stuttering, but his phone vibrated sharply on the desk before she could respond. Alexander glanced at the message, and his expression turned to ice. He strode toward the door without a word, but Naomi stepped before him. "What is it?" she demanded. "Stay here," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Alexander, Naomi, stay. Here." She froze at the intensity in his voice, but watched as he disappeared into the hallway, his footsteps fading into the silence. Moments later, a low, muffled sound echoed through the estate, sharp, urgent, like glass shattering in the distance. Naomi's pulse raced as she followed the sound, despite his warning, her hand brushing the cold walls as she descended the winding staircase. At the bottom, shadows danced wildly across the grand hall, where two of Alexander's security guards lay unconscious, and standing above them was a figure cloaked in black. The intruder turned just enough for Naomi to glimpse his face, which she recognized. Luca Caruso. Before she could speak, Alexander appeared, his pistol raised, storm-gray eyes locked on Luca. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" he growled. Luca held up his hand slowly, his expression infuriatingly calm. "Relax, Cross. If I wanted her dead, she'd be dead." Alexander advanced, his fury palpable. "Please give me one reason not to put a bullet between your eyes." Naomi stepped forward instinctively. "Stop. Please, stop." Alexander's jaw tightened, but his gaze remained on Luca. Luca lowered his voice, shifting his attention to Naomi. "We need to talk, you and I. You don't get to come here and make demands." Alexander snapped. "I'm not here for you," Luca said evenly. "I'm here because Delgado isn't the enemy you think he is. There's someone else pulling the strings, someone who wants Naomi more than you realize." Alexander's grip on his weapon didn't loosen, but his eyes flickered with calculation. "Talk," he ordered. Luca's jaw tensed. "The blood pact isn't just about power. It's about survival. The council wants Naomi because she's not Bandari, because her bloodline ties to something older, something they've been hunting for decades." Naomi frowned, clutching the pendant at her throat. "Then what am I?" Luca's gaze softened slightly as he answered, "The last heir of a forgotten dynasty. One erased from history to protect the world from what your family created." Naomi's breath caught, but Alexander stepped forward before she could ask more. Grabbing Luca by the collar. "Why should I believe a single word you say?" Luca met his glare without flinching. "Because Delgado already knows. And he's making his move tonight." An alarm blared suddenly, sharp and deafening. The estate's security system roared, locking down doors and windows. Alexander cursed under his breath. "He's here." Naomi's eyes widened. "Delgado." No, Luca corrected grimly, drawing his own weapon. Not Delgado. Someone worse. A team of masked operatives stormed through the front entrance, weapons drawn, moving with surgical precision. Alexander pulled Naomi behind him, his voice calm but cold as steel. Stay low. Don't move until I tell you. The sound of gunfire shattered the silence. Hours later, when the chaos subsided and the intruders fled, the estate lay in ruins, marble-cracked walls, scorched blood staining the polished floors. A bullet grazed Alexander's arm, but he ignored the pain, focusing entirely on Naomi. She knelt beside one of the fallen guards, her hands trembling, her mind reeling. They knew where to strike. Alexander muttered, scanning the damage. This wasn't Delgado. This was someone inside. Naomi froze, the weight of his words sinking in. You're saying there's a traitor here? Yes, he said grimly. And until we find them, no one is safe. Later that night, Naomi sat by the fireplace, her knees drawn to her chest, silent tears tracing her cheeks. Alexander approached, carefully, sitting across from her, his voice low and raw. Naomi, look at me. She did, and for the first time she saw him without the mask or armor. His storm-gray eyes carried exhaustion, guilt, and something deeper, something almost fragile. I can't lose you, he whispered. Not to them, not to anyone. Her chest ached at the vulnerability in his voice. Then stop treating me like I'm made of glass, she murmured. Stop hiding the truth from me. Alexander reached for her hand, his touch tentative, almost reverent. If I tell you everything, there's no going back. Then don't let me go forward blind, she whispered back. The silence stretched thick and electric until he leaned forward, his forehead resting gently against hers. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The storm outside raged, but it was only them in that fragile pocket of time. And when Alexander's lips brushed hers, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, raw, a collision of fear and longing, love and danger intertwined. Naomi clung to him, her fingers curling into his shirt, as though anchoring herself to the one constant in a world crumbling around her. But even as the fire between them burned, Naomi knew something he didn't. She had read another line in her mother's letter, hidden beneath the folds. If you love him, keep him away. As dawn broke, Naomi stood at the balcony, the pendant cool against her skin, her thoughts a whirlwind of dread and longing. Behind her, Alexander slept, unaware of the storm gathering on the horizon. Naomi whispered to herself, her voice breaking, I can't lose you, but staying might destroy you. Far away, Delgado watched the sun rise from his penthouse, a single name on his lips as he made the call that would change everything. It's time. Activate Phase 2. And deep beneath the city, someone unseen opened a vault marked with a single symbol, the infinity loop of Naomi's pendant, releasing secrets that should have remained buried forever. The real war had just begun. The night was heavy with silence, which carried warnings in its stillness. Rain slicked the windows of Cross Estate, soft murmurs of thunder trembling in the distance. Alexander stood at the edge of his office desk, hands pressed against the polished wood, eyes fixed on a map scattered with red-marked locations. Luca leaned casually against the wall opposite him, arms crossed, watching with detached amusement. They're tightening the noose, Luca said finally. Every strike Delgado makes is closer, sharper. He's testing your defenses. Alexander didn't look up. He's testing me, he muttered darkly. But before Luca could reply, the shrill ring of Alexander's private phone sliced through the tension. He snatched it up instantly. At first, there was only silence. Then a voice, smooth, poisonous, deliberate. Cross Delgado said, his tone like velvet wrapped around a blade. You really should have kept her safer. Alexander's entire body went rigid. Where is she? A low chuckle. Find her. The line went dead. Alexander's strides thundered down the corridor toward Naomi's quarters. Luca followed close behind, but one look inside was enough to freeze them both. The room was empty. Curtains swayed in the wind from an open window, the faint perfume of Naomi's scent lingering like a ghost. A single card on the pillow marked with Delgado's family crest, a serpent eating its own tail. Luca cursed under his breath. You know what this means. Alexander picked up the card, his storm-gray eyes hard as steel. It means he's declared war. Hours later, Naomi woke to darkness. Her wrists were bound, her head pounding, as the muffled hum of an engine thrummed beneath her. When her vision cleared, she realized she was in the back of a blacked-out SUV, two masked men flanking her on either side. Where are you taking me? She demanded, her voice hoarse but steady. Neither answered. The vehicle screeched to a halt minutes later, and she was dragged into what appeared to be an underground chamber. The air was damp and cold, lit only by torches that flickered against ancient stone walls. Delgado was seated at the far end like a king upon a high-backed chair. Naomi, he purred, rising slowly. Finally we meet without your shadow guarding you. She glared at him, defiance blazing in her emerald eyes. If you think Alexander won't find me, oh, he'll find you, Delgado interrupted smoothly, stepping closer. That's the point. Delgado circled her like a predator, his voice dripping with calculation. You want answers, he said softly. I can give them to you. About your mother, about the blood pact, about why they're really after you. I'd rather die than make a deal with you, Naomi spat. He smiled coldly. Brave words. But what about the lives you'll destroy without even knowing it? Her brows furrowed. What are you talking about? Delgado leaned close, his whisper scorching her skin. The prophecy. Naomi. The twins. Her heart stopped. What twins? You don't know, do you? His grin widened. Of course not. He hasn't told you. Naomi's breath caught confusion and fear tightening in her chest. Delgado straightened his voice, carrying across the chamber. Two heirs born of your bloodline will determine the fate of the underworld. One will inherit the throne. The other will burn it to the ground. Naomi stared at him, her pulse pounding in her ears. At the estate, Alexander had mobilized every resource, drones, trackers, encrypted feeds. But Delgado's trail was smoke and mirrors. You're losing control, Luca observed coolly. Alexander's gaze snapped to him, sharp enough to draw blood. Say that again. I'm saying, Luca replied, unbothered. You're so blinded by rage, you're not thinking clearly. Delgado wants you unstable. Please don't give him the satisfaction. I don't have time for games, Alexander growled, grabbing his jacket and strapping on his weapon. I'm bringing her back. Luca pushed off the wall, following without hesitation. Then let me drive. You'll kill us both otherwise. Back in the underground chamber, Delgado slid a file across the table toward her. Naomi hesitated before opening it and froze. Inside were surveillance photos, dates, and coded documents linking her to Project Helix. What is this? She demanded. Insurance, Delgado said. For me, for you, for the world. I don't believe you, she whispered. You don't have to, he replied. But you will believe the council when they come for you. They'll put chains on your wrists and call it salvation. Naomi swallowed hard, her mind spinning. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally. Because Delgado said, leaning close again, you're more valuable alive than dead. But if you choose wrong, he smiled faintly. Everything burns. Explosions rocked the underground chamber, dust and stone raining from the ceiling. Delgado cursed, signaling his guards. Alexander's voice echoed through the chaos. Raw and lethal Naomi gunfire erupted as masked operatives stormed the chamber, moving with surgical precision. Luca covered Alexander's flank, his expression sharp and cold, while Alexander ruthlessly cut down Delgado's guards. Naomi struggled against her restraints until Alexander reached her, his hands surprisingly gentle as he freed her wrists. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low, trembling with barely restrained emotion. She shook her head quickly, but Delgado's mocking voice cut through the smoke before she could speak. "You think this ends tonight? Cross," he snarled. "You've only accelerated the inevitable." Alexander turned, leveling his gun at him, but Delgado was already gone, vanishing into the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the chamber. Later at Cross Estate, Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, the night's events replaying endlessly in her mind. Alexander stood by the window silent, his shoulders tense. Finally, she broke the quiet. "The prophecy," she whispered. "Is it true?" He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "You knew," she accused softly, her voice shaking. "You learned about the twins." Alexander's silence was answer enough. "Why didn't you tell me?" He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Because knowing would change everything. It would put a target on you. On them." Her chest tightened. "Them." She repeated the word, foreign and fragile, on her lips. Alexander crossed the room, kneeling before her, taking her hands in his. "I was trying to protect you," he said softly, his voice cracking. Her tears fell freely now, hot against her cheeks. "From the world," she whispered. "Or from you." Naomi met Luca secretly the following evening, away from Alexander's watchful eyes. He leaned against the hood of his car, the cold night air carrying the faint scent of rain. "You found Project Helix, didn't you?" he said without preamble. She nodded. "Then you know this isn't just about Delgado, or the Council," Luca said grimly. "There's another faction, one older, more dangerous. They created the blood pact to control you. But if the twins are born, the balance shatters." Naomi clenched the pendant tightly in her hand. "Then I have to stop them." Luca's gaze softened. "Or you embrace it." She stared at him confused. He continued. "The blood pact wasn't just a curse. It was a key. Whoever unlocks it controls the entire underworld." Naomi's breath caught. A choice was forming, one that could save or doom them all. That night, as Naomi stood on the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below Alexander joined her silently, slipping his arm around her waist. For a moment, neither spoke. Then softly she said, "If the prophecy is true, what happens if we have the twins?" Alexander's storm-gray eyes met hers, a flicker of fear buried beneath his control. Then he whispered, "The world will choose sides." Far away, Delgado stood in a high-rise, overlooking the burning lights of the city, speaking into a secure line. Phase 3 begins now. If she carries the twins, eliminate Alexander first. And deep beneath the Council's headquarters, an ancient vault creaked open, releasing the sealed archives of Project Helix and a single chilling inscription. 2 heirs. 1 empire. 1 apocalypse. The war for Naomi's bloodline had only just begun. The morning light crept across the Cross Estate, spilling gold over velvet drapes and marble floors. But Naomi felt none of its warmth. She sat alone at the edge of the bed, her fingers pressed against her wrist, counting heartbeats that weren't only hers anymore. The test had confirmed it. She was pregnant. 1,000 emotions collided inside her: disbelief, fear, wonder, and a quiet, unshakable dread. Delgado's words from that underground chamber echoed in her mind. 2 heirs born of your bloodline will determine the fate of the underworld. One will inherit the throne. The other will burn it to the ground. She pressed a trembling hand against her abdomen, her breath shallow. 2 lives. 1 prophecy. 0 certainty. Alexander found her in the garden later that morning, standing by the fountain where sunlight fractured into diamonds across the water's surface. "Naomi," he called softly, his voice unusually gentle. She turned slowly, her emerald eyes luminous with unshed tears. "I need to tell you something." The moment stretched between them, fragile as glass. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. For a heartbeat, Alexander didn't move. His storm-gray eyes widened. His breath caught, and then slowly he stepped closer, as though approaching something sacred. "You're sure?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the storm beneath his control. She nodded, unable to speak. He cupped her face with both hands, pressing his forehead to hers. His voice was low, ragged. "Mine." She let out a shaky laugh through her tears. "Who else?" Relief washed across his features, raw and unguarded, but almost instantly shadows crept back into his expression. "The prophecy," he murmured under his breath, more to himself than to her. Naomi stiffened. "You believe it?" "I believe people will believe it," he corrected. "And that's enough to make us targets." By evening, a formal summons arrived from the council, sealed with obsidian wax, stamped with the crest of the Underworld Syndicate. Alexander tore it open without hesitation, scanning the message before throwing it onto the desk. "They know," he said grimly. Naomi's breath caught. "About the pregnancy?" "Yes." Delgado leaked it. Her hand flew to her chest, panic rising. "What do they want?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "An audience. Tomorrow." The council chamber was carved from black marble, lit by a single ring of suspended fire above a circular table. 12 figures sat cloaked in shadow, their faces concealed, their power palpable. Despite his protests, Alexander stood tall at the center, Naomi by his side. Luca leaned against a column nearby, his expression unreadable. An elder council member spoke first, his voice like grinding stone. "We hear whispers of a prophecy. 2 heirs. 2 fates. Tell us, Cross, is it true?" Alexander's tone was measured steel. "It's irrelevant. What matters is that Naomi is under my protection." Another voice, sharp and female, cut through the silence. "Protection or possession?" Naomi flinched slightly, but Alexander's hand found hers beneath the table, grounding her. The elder spoke again. "The blood pact was designed to prevent chaos. If she carries the twins, you risk destabilizing everything we've built." Naomi's voice trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "You mean everything you've controlled?" Gasps rippled across the chamber. A murmur rose among the cloaked figures until one slammed a gavel against the table, silencing the room. "We will deliberate," the elder declared coldly. "Until then, she remains confined to Cross Estate." Alexander's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. The promise of war burned in his eyes. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. The storm outside mirrored the one raging inside her. She wandered the empty halls, her bare feet silent on the marble, until faint voices drew her toward Alexander's private study. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Luca stood opposite one of Alexander's most trusted lieutenants, a man Naomi had known for years. "Delgado moves tonight," the lieutenant whispered urgently. "Phase 3 is in motion. We're too late." Luca's response was low, sharp, and to Naomi's horror familiar in its tone. "We're not too late. We give Delgado what he wants." Naomi's breath caught. She stumbled backward, knocking over a vase that shattered loudly against the floor. Both men turned sharply, their expressions unreadable. Naomi, Lucas said smoothly, stepping toward her. You weren't supposed to hear that. Give him what he wants, she whispered, her voice shaking. What are you doing? Luca. It's not what you think. He began, but Alexander appeared suddenly, his storm-gray gaze slicing the tension like lightning. Out he barked, both of you. Later in their room, Naomi confronted Alexander, her voice raw. You're hiding things from me again. I'm protecting you, he insisted. His hands braced against the dresser as though holding himself together. Protecting me, she repeated bitterly. Or controlling me. He turned sharply, eyes burning with a storm of emotions she couldn't decipher. Do I want this? He demanded, his voice breaking. Do you think I wanted any of this? The prophecy, the council, Delgado, any of it? Naomi swallowed hard, tears threatening to fall. I think you don't trust me, she whispered. The silence between them was louder than any argument. The next day, Naomi searched the restricted archives deep beneath the estate, determined to find answers on her own. There, buried beneath layers of dust and encryption, she found a sealed file marked Project Helix Classified. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing fragments of decoded data diagrams, formulas, and a series of chilling annotations. Subject 0, viable. Successor sequence confirmed. Activation upon the birth of twin heirs. Her breath caught as she read the final line, written in blood-red ink. If both survive, the pact is broken. That evening, Naomi stood on the balcony, the classified file clutched to her chest, when Alexander found her. I know, he said softly, as though reading her thoughts. You knew this all along, she accused. I suspected, he admitted. But now it's confirmed. If both twins live, the council loses control. Her voice trembled. And Delgado gains it. Alexander nodded grimly. Naomi stared into the night, her hand unconsciously resting on her stomach. So what do we do? Alexander's answer was simple, terrifying, and absolute. We keep them alive, no matter the cost. Unbeknownst to them, someone inside Cross Estate had already betrayed their plan. That night, a coded message was transmitted to Delgado. She knows. Move to Phase 4. Delgado smiled darkly in a hidden facility beneath the city as he studied a holographic model of the twins' genetic sequence. Perfect, he whispered. Let her believe she has a choice. It'll already be too late by the time she realizes the truth. As dawn approached, Naomi stirred awake to find Alexander gone. Panic flooded her chest until she found a single note on the pillow beside her. Trust me. Don't leave the estate. But looking out the window, she saw black SUVs lining the perimeter. Armed operatives surrounded Cross Estate, not Delgado's men, but the council's. Naomi's hand flew instinctively to her stomach, her pulse racing. Far away, Delgado stood on the rooftop of a skyscraper, speaking into a secure line, his voice like silk over steel. Capture her alive. Kill Cross if necessary. The twins must be mine. And deep beneath the syndicate's vaults, the ancient seal on the blood pact began to fracture, awakening something far older, far darker than anyone had imagined. The war for the heirs had begun. Sometimes love saves us. Sometimes it destroys us. The siege. The storm had yet to break, but Cross Estate was already under siege. The hum of black SUVs outside was constant headlights, slicing through the pre-dawn mist, as dozens of armed operatives moved like shadows across the grounds. Naomi clutched the railing tightly from the balcony, her knuckles, pale heart racing. Inside her chest, fear battled fiercely with something sharper resolve. She felt the twins stirring within her tiny lives, unknowingly carrying the weight of a prophecy neither asked for. Behind her, the door creaked open. Alexander entered, his dark shirt soaked with rain, his storm-gray eyes blazing. "The Council's forces are here," he said grimly. "We have minutes, Naomi, not hours." "Then we leave," she whispered. He shook his head. "No. If we run, Delgado wins. He wants us exposed." Her voice trembled. "And if we stay—" Alexander loaded a fresh magazine into his pistol, his movements precise, controlled, deadly. "Then we fight." Before Naomi could respond, Luca stormed into the room breathless and wild-eyed. "They've breached the south wing," he barked. "We're outnumbered at least 40 men inside the grounds already." Alexander didn't flinch. "Get Naomi to the safe room. Now." But Luca hesitated just for a fraction of a second. Naomi noticed it. So did Alexander. Luca Alexander said slowly, dangerously calm. "Where were you before the breach? I was securing the archives." And Luca shot back, his tone sharp and defensive. Alexander stepped closer, lowering his voice into a growl. "Or were you unlocking them?" For a tense heartbeat, neither man moved. Then the estate's alarm blared violently, shattering the moment and Naomi's world. Because when she turned toward Luca, his pistol was already drawn. "Naomi, run!" Alexander roared. But Delgado's strike team was faster. Glass exploded as armed operatives stormed through the balcony, their boots slamming against the marble. Smoke filled the room, instantly choking, blinding. Alexander grabbed Naomi, shoving her behind him as gunfire erupted, deafening and chaotic. She clutched his shirt, refusing to let go, but Luca yanked her away with brutal force, his grip iron around her wrist. "Luca," she screamed, struggling violently. "Why are you doing this?" His jaw was clenched, his voice low and strained. "It's the only way to keep you alive." But before she could demand answers, a flash grenade detonated, blinding white light, swallowing the room. When Naomi's vision cleared, Alexander was on his knees, blood streaking his cheek, and Naomi was gone. Hours later, silence hung heavy over Cross Estate, broken only by the faint crackle of fires, still smoldering in the wreckage. Alexander sat in his office, his pistol dismantled on the desk before him, his hands streaked with blood. Luca's betrayal burned behind his eyes, a blade twisting deeper with every heartbeat. "You're losing her," said one of his lieutenants quietly. Alexander didn't look up. "No." He said, his voice low, deadly calm. "I'm taking her back." How? The lieutenant asked carefully. "Delgado's men will expect a frontal assault." Alexander finally raised his head, storm-gray gaze colder than steel. "Then we won't give them one." Naomi woke to the smell of damp stone and iron. Her wrists were bound, her body aching from the violent struggle. She was in an underground chamber, torchlight dancing across the walls, casting monstrous shadows. Delgado stood a few feet away, hands clasped behind his back, his expression calm, too calm. "Comfortable?" he asked smoothly. "Go to hell," she spat, forcing strength into her trembling voice. He smiled faintly. "You'll forgive me if I decline the invitation." Naomi glared at him, emerald eyes blazing. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" Delgado stepped closer, lowering his voice like silk over poison. "It's not what I want, Naomi. It's what the world needs." Delgado gestured to a holographic projection rising from the center of the chamber. It displayed intertwined genetic patterns, symbols Naomi didn't recognize, fractals spiraling endlessly outward. "This," Delgado said softly, "is you." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You are the key," he whispered. Project Helix wasn't just about power. It was about creating perfection. Two heirs, Naomi. Two halves of a design written long before you were born. Her breath caught. "A design." "Yes," Delgado murmured. The blood pact wasn't meant to prevent chaos. It was meant to create it, to trigger the end of the old world and the rise of the new. Naomi's blood ran cold. Meanwhile, Alexander moved like a predator through the city's underbelly, his movements silent, lethal. He tracked Delgado's strike team through encrypted comms, every step a countdown to war. By his side was Seraphine, an enigmatic hacker he'd pulled from the syndicate's shadows, a woman whose loyalty was as sharp as her knives. "Coordinates locked," she said, glancing up from her tablet. "Naomi's underground east sector." Alexander's jaw tightened. "How many guards?" "Too many," she admitted. "But Delgado isn't expecting you to come through the storm drains." Alexander's lips curved into something dark. "Good." Hours later, Naomi sat in her chamber, her wrists still bound, her mind racing. Luca appeared at the door, his expression unreadable. "You," she whispered, venom in her voice. "Get away from me." He stepped inside, holding up his hands. "Listen to me. Delgado isn't who you think he is." Her laugh was hollow. "Says the man who dragged me here." "I did it to save you," Luca said urgently. "The council ordered your execution. Delgado intercepted them first. If you're with him, you live." Naomi froze, her thoughts spiraling, and Alexander Luca's jaw tightened. He wasn't part of the deal. The ceiling exploded. Stone and steel rained down as Alexander descended like vengeance itself, his dark clothes torn, his weapon blazing. Delgado's guards fell one by one, but Alexander didn't stop moving until he reached Naomi, tearing the chains from her wrists. "You came," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Always," he rasped, pulling her into his arms before spinning to face Delgado. The two men locked eyes, predator and predator, storm and fire, as silence swallowed the chamber. Delgado smiled faintly. "You're too late, Cross." Before Alexander could respond, the holographic projection behind Delgado shifted, the twin spirals collapsing into a single blinding symbol. Naomi gasped as the pendant around her neck burned hot against her skin. Delgado's expression sharpened, his voice low and reverent. "It's starting." Naomi clutched her stomach instinctively, her breath ragged. "What's starting?" Alexander demanded. Delgado's gaze flickered to Naomi, his voice soft, almost worshipful. "The activation." The chamber trembled violently, the holographic spiral pulsing with energy as ancient scripts burned into the stone walls around them. Naomi screamed, collapsing against Alexander as an invisible force surged through her veins, her blood reacting to something far beyond her control. Alexander held her tightly, fury and fear warring in his chest, while Delgado watched with quiet satisfaction. When the light finally died, Naomi opened her eyes, and they glowed faintly gold. Delgado smiled slowly, whispering a single word that froze Alexander's blood. "Mother." Some powers are gifts, others are curses waiting to bloom. The chamber still smelled of smoke and burning stone. Alexander knelt on the fractured marble floor, holding Naomi as her breathing slowly steadied. Her skin glowed faintly, golden veins pulsing beneath the surface like threads of living light. "Naomi," he whispered, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. "Talk to me." Her lashes fluttered open. The emerald in her eyes was gone, replaced by an unnatural liquid gold. "I can hear them," she whispered hoarsely, her voice trembling. Voices, thousands of them, all at once. Alexander cupped her face, forcing her gaze on him. "Focus on me. Breathe." But even as she tried, the ground beneath them vibrated with a low hum, like the world responding to the awakening inside her. Delgado watched with quiet awe, his lips curling into a slow, reverent smile. "The blood pact lives," he murmured, Later, inside the safety of a secured safe house, Naomi sat by the window silent and pale, the pendant heavy against her chest. Alexander stood at the room's far end, speaking quietly with Seraphine, his most trusted ally. "She's changing," Seraphine said flatly. "Whatever's in her blood, it's active now. If she loses control, we won't be able to contain it." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Then we won't let her lose control." Seraphine's gaze sharpened. "And if we can't stop it?" He didn't hesitate. "Then I'll burn the world before I let anyone touch her." But Naomi, hearing every word, clenched her fists. She wasn't sure what terrified her more, her new power, or the man she was becoming to protect her. 2 nights later, chaos erupted. The Syndicate Council launched an ambush on the safe house, their elite operatives moving like ghosts through the dark. Alexander intercepted them in the courtyard, twin blades flashing silver under the moonlight. Every strike was precise, brutal, the storm-gray predator unleashed. Inside, Naomi gripped the pendant tightly as Seraphine pulled her toward the panic room. But before they reached it, 3 masked assassins dropped from the rafters, blades glinting. Naomi screamed, and the walls exploded. A shockwave of golden energy burst from her body, hurling the assassins across the room with bone-shattering force. For a heartbeat, silence. Naomi stared at her hands, shaking violently, unable to comprehend what she'd done. Seraphine caught her wrist, her voice sharp. "Control it, Naomi, or you'll kill us all." By dawn, the courtyard was littered with fallen operatives, council insignias burning on their sleeves. Delgado arrived late to the aftermath, stepping over bodies with unsettling calm. "You see," he told Alexander almost conversationally, "they've already chosen sides. And so must you." Alexander's blade was still wet with blood, his voice low and lethal. "If you think I'll stand beside you, you already are," Delgado interrupted smoothly. "Every moment you defy the council, you step closer to me." Alexander gritted his teeth, but deep down he knew Delgado was correct about one thing. War had begun. That night, Naomi sat alone in her room, staring at her trembling hands. A knock came at the door. "Come in," she called softly. Luca entered, his expression hesitant. He hadn't spoken to her since the kidnapping. "I came to explain," he began quietly. Naomi's jaw tightened. "Explain why you dragged me to Delgado. Why did you nearly kill Alexander?" "I did it to save you," Luca said, stepping closer. "The council ordered your execution, Naomi." Delgado intercepted them first. She hesitated, remembering the fragments of whispered conversations, the coded messages she wasn't supposed to hear. Then, "Tell me why I heard you say the twins belong to Delgado." Luca's silence was answer enough. Naomi's hand trembled, the pendant in her palm, sparking faintly with golden light. "Get out," she whispered, voice breaking, "before I make you." Seraphine later revealed what she'd decoded from Project Helix archives. "The twins aren't just heirs," she told Alexander grimly. "They're weapons, living conduits designed to activate the entire blood pact." Alexander's breath stilled. "Weapons." He repeated the word, "foreign and foul." Seraphine nodded. "If both survive, the pact collapses. Every syndicate faction loses control. The underworld falls into chaos. And if one dies, then the survivor rules everything," she said quietly. "But the council knows this. Delgado knows this. And now Naomi knows." Later that night, Naomi found Alexander on the rooftop, watching the storm crawl across the city skyline. "You should have told me," she said softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil. He didn't look at her. "I was trying to protect you." "You keep saying that," she whispered, stepping closer until the rain soaked her dress. "But every time you protect me, you make choices for me." He turned finally, his storm-gray eyes raw with exhaustion. "Because I can't lose you, Naomi. I can't lose them." Naomi's chest tightened. And what if to save me you have to destroy me? The silence that followed said more than words ever could. Delgado sent his forces again the following evening, not to kill Naomi this time, but to provoke her. Dozens of operatives stormed the estate, their attack precise, surgical, designed to trigger one thing, her power. And it worked. Cornered in the West Hall, Naomi felt the panic seize her chest, and with it came the golden surge, uncontrolled, violent, absolute. The energy burst from her in waves, shattering stone, splintering steel, and bringing the syndicate soldiers to their knees. When the light finally dimmed, the hall was silent, littered with unconscious bodies. Alexander rushed to her side, catching her trembling frame before she collapsed. Naomi's voice cracked as she whispered against his chest. I'm becoming something I don't understand. Far away in a hidden syndicate chamber, Delgado stood before a figure cloaked in silver, their face obscured. She's awakening, Delgado reported. The figure's voice was calm, eerily detached. Good. The sooner the pact activates, the sooner we move. And cross? Delgado asked carefully. A faint smile flickered beneath the hood. Cross is irrelevant, the figure murmured. The mother will break herself before we ever touch her. That night Naomi dreamed. But it wasn't a dream. She stood in an endless void, suspended in golden light, her hands trembling as two silhouettes appeared before her two children. Twins. One smiled eyes like molten gold. The other wept, shadows dripping from their fingertips like liquid night. Choose 1,000 voices whispered inside her mind. One to save, one to sacrifice. Naomi woke with a scream clutching her abdomen, her body drenched in sweat. Alexander burst into the room, grabbing her shoulders. Naomi, what happened? Her eyes met his, wild and terrified. They want me to choose, she choked out. Between them. Far below the estate, deep beneath the syndicate's archives, the blood-packed seal splintered completely, and a surge of ancient power was unleashed into the world's veins. The countdown to war had begun. Dawn broke over Cross Estate, pale light spilling through fractured windows. Naomi stood on the balcony, her breath clouding in the cold air, her hands gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. Her body still trembled from the nightmare, from the vision of the twins asking her to choose. Behind her, Alexander approached quietly, placing his coat over her shoulders. You didn't sleep, he said softly. She shook her head, her voice hoarse. I'm afraid to. He touched her chin gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. You are not alone in this, Naomi. Whatever happens, we face it together. But as his storm-gray eyes searched hers, she wondered silently if even he understood what together truly meant anymore. Later that morning, Naomi sat cross-legged on the floor of the training chamber as Seraphine ran diagnostics on her vitals. Golden energy pulsed faintly beneath Naomi's skin veins, glowing like liquid sunlight. Seraphine glanced at the readings and swore under her breath. It's accelerating, she muttered. Your powers amplifying exponentially every time you lose emotional control. Naomi looked up, fear clouding her emerald gold gaze. And if I can't control it? Seraphine hesitated, then spoke carefully. Then you'll destroy yourself, and possibly everything around you. Alexander stepped forward, jaw tight. Then we teach her control. For days, Alexander and Seraphine worked with Naomi relentlessly. She learned to regulate her breathing center, her heartbeat, and force the chaos inside her into stillness. At first, small victories came: shattered glass, stopped mid-air, a single floating ember extinguished on command. But then in one brutal session, Naomi collapsed to her knees, sobbing as golden light burned across her skin like fire. Enough, Alexander growled, kneeling beside her. We're done for today. Naomi shook her head, struggling to breathe. No, I have to master it. If I don't, they'll take the twins. I won't let them. He caught her trembling hands, holding them firmly. Then you won't, he promised, his voice a quiet storm. But deep inside, Alexander feared what he didn't say out loud. If Naomi couldn't control the power, someone would use it against her. 3 nights later, Luca returned to the estate, bruised and battered, blood crusted on his temple. Alexander nearly put a bullet between his eyes before Naomi stopped him. "Wait," she said sharply, stepping between them. "Let him speak." Luca's voice was ragged. "Delgado's moving tonight. He's found the original Blood Pact archives buried beneath the Syndicate's vaults. If he activates them, you lose everything." Alexander's hand tightened on his pistol. "Why are you here?" "Luca, to warn us, or to lure us into another trap." Luca's gaze shifted to Naomi, his voice softening. "I made a mistake before. I thought Delgado was the lesser evil. I was wrong." Naomi hesitated, torn between fury and the echo of old trust. "And why should we believe you now?" Luca looked at her with something almost broken in his expression. "Because I'm not the only traitor here." That night, Seraphine revealed what she'd discovered in a decrypted transmission intercepted from the council. "It's not Delgado we should fear," she said grimly. "It's someone inside our own walls." Naomi's stomach turned cold. "Someone here." Seraphine nodded. "Someone is feeding both Delgado and the council. They know the twins' activation timeline. They know Naomi's unstable power thresholds. They know everything." Alexander's storm-gray eyes darkened to steel. "Find them," he ordered. "Whoever they are, I want their head." The betrayal came faster than anyone expected. At midnight, the estate's internal security systems were overridden, from the inside doors slamming open as armed forces poured in. Naomi woke to chaos alarms, blaring smoke choking the hallways, golden energy sparking beneath her skin without consent. Alexander burst into the room, pulling her into his arms. "Stay with me," he commanded, his voice steady despite the hell outside. But when they reached the east corridor, Naomi froze. Seraphine stood at the end of the hall, blade dripping crimson. "You," Alexander said softly. Betrayal laced through every syllable. Seraphine's expression was cold, unrecognizable. "I told you from the beginning," she said calmly. "The council cannot be defied. The pact must be controlled." Naomi's voice shook with fury. "You sold us out." Seraphine tilted her head, slightly, eyes sharp as glass. "I didn't sell you out, Naomi. I'm saving you from yourself." Then, before anyone could move, she activated a device strapped to her wrist. Naomi collapsed instantly, golden light draining from her body as though siphoned away. Alexander caught her before she hit the ground, rage and terror twisting together inside him. "What did you do to her?" he roared. Seraphine's voice was calm, almost pitying. "I severed her link to the twins, temporarily. If I hadn't, they would have burned you both alive." Hours later, when Naomi woke, the world felt colder, emptier. The faint hum of energy beneath her skin was gone, replaced by an aching silence. Alexander sat at her bedside, his hand clasping hers tightly. "What happened?" she whispered. He hesitated, his storm-gray eyes soft with guilt. Seraphine was working for the council. Naomi's breath caught. "She was the traitor." "Yes," Alexander said quietly, "but she also saved you." Naomi frowned weakly. "Saved me?" Alexander hesitated, then handed her a fragment of decrypted data from the archives Seraphine had accessed. Subject 0, Naomi Helix. Twin sequence confirmed. Activation protocol irreversible. Her heart pounded. "Irreversible," she repeated softly. "Meaning, once they're born." Alexander's silence was confirmation enough. Naomi stood alone on the balcony by nightfall, staring out over the burning horizon. Luca approached quietly, his voice low. "You're not sleeping." I can't, she whispered. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. One laughing, one crying. Both are calling for me to choose. Luca hesitated before speaking softly. What if the choice isn't about them, Naomi? What if it's about you? She turned to him, confused. What do you mean? He sighed heavily, as though the weight of his words crushed him. Project Helix didn't create the twins, he said quietly. It created you. Naomi stared at him. Her breath caught the world tilting beneath her feet. What she whispered. You were designed. Naomi. Luca said, his voice breaking. Not born. The twins. They're not nature's accident. They're the purpose you were built for. Before she could respond, an explosion ripped through the lower levels of the estate, hurling them both to the ground. Alexander burst into the room, weapon-drawn eyes blazing. We're under siege again, he barked. Get her out now. Far away. Delgado stood inside the syndicate's deepest vaults, watching the ancient blood pact symbols ignite one by one. He smiled darkly, whispering into the comms. Phase 5 begins. Please bring me the mother alive. Kill Cross if necessary. And deep beneath the ruins of the syndicate's archives, a single machine stirred for the first time in centuries, its core glowing with the same golden light running through Naomi's veins. The twins' countdown had started. Smoke still curled from the ruins of the East Wing, and the Cross estate was shrouded in a tense, eerie silence. Naomi sat on the marble steps outside, knees drawn to her chest, the pendant clutched in her fist so tightly it cut into her palm. She didn't feel the cold, didn't feel the ash in the air. All she felt was Luca's words echoing endlessly inside her. Project Helix didn't just create the twins, it created you. Alexander approached quietly, his shirt streaked with blood, his jaw tight. He crouched before her, placing a hand gently on her knee. Naomi, he said softly, searching her expression. Talk to me. She lifted her gaze slowly, eyes shimmering with an unfamiliar gold beneath the green. Tell me the truth, she whispered, her voice breaking. Did you know? Alexander hesitated, and that hesitation was an answer. Naomi stood abruptly, shoving his hand away. You knew, she accused, her voice trembling between fury and heartbreak. I suspected, Alexander admitted quietly, his storm-gray eyes shadowed with guilt. But I didn't want to believe it until I was sure. And you thought keeping it from me would protect me? Yes, he said. Naomi laughed bitterly, a sound edged with pain. Protect me or protect your claim over me. The words struck deeper than either expected. Alexander closed his eyes briefly, steadying his breath. Naomi, you are not an experiment. You're not a weapon. I don't even know what I am. She cut in, clutching the pendant like a lifeline. Before either could say more, Seraphine stormed into the courtyard, bruised but unbowed. They've moved, she said breathlessly. The council just issued a decree. Alexander's eyes narrowed. What kind of decree? Seraphine handed him a sealed communique. Alexander tore it open and scanned the message, his expression hardening with every line. They've declared Naomi a Class 1 asset, he said coldly. Naomi blinked. What does that mean? Seraphine's jaw tightened. It means they no longer recognize you as a person, Naomi. You're property now. Syndicate property. Naomi's breath hitched, her chest constricting. Alexander crushed the communique in his fist, his voice low, dangerous over my dead body. Far from the estate, in the depths of the syndicate's underground citadel, Delgado stood before a towering holographic projection of the Blood Pact archives. Activate the sequence, he ordered his lieutenant. A technician hesitated. But sir, doing so before the twins' birth could destabilize. That's the point. Delgado interrupted, his tone icy. If I can't control the pact, no one will. Behind him, A massive chamber came alive with golden circuits and pulsing light, the heartbeat of Project Helix. The countdown had begun. Naomi woke the next morning, drenched in sweat, her dreams filled with spirals of blinding light and whispers of ancient voices calling her name. When she opened her eyes, she found Seraphine at her bedside holding a scanner. "What's happening to me?" Naomi whispered. Seraphine glanced at the readings, her expression grim. "Your body's adapting to the activation. The twins are accelerating it." Naomi clutched her abdomen instinctively. "What happens when it finishes?" Seraphine hesitated before answering softly. "You'll stop being Naomi Helix and become something else entirely." Alexander found her later in the West Wing library, sitting cross-legged among scattered files on the blood pact. "You're avoiding me," he said quietly. Naomi didn't look up. "I'm learning who I am without you." His chest tightened at the quiet steel in her voice. "Do you want this?" he said, sitting opposite her. "You think I want to watch you carry the weight of a war you didn't ask for?" Her eyes met his, sharp and luminous. "Then help me, Alexander. Don't hide me. Don't shield me. Stand beside me." He reached out his hand, brushing hers gently, reverently. "Always," he whispered. But neither noticed Seraphine's silent figure lingering in the doorway, her eyes unreadable. Luca cornered Alexander in the war room that night, his voice sharp with urgency. "You have a mole inside your inner circle," he said grimly. Alexander's gaze hardened. Seraphine Luca shook his head. "No, it's worse. Someone higher." Before Alexander could respond, the estate's systems went dark alarms, screaming through the halls. Naomi burst into the room, eyes wide. "What's happening?" Seraphine appeared seconds later holding a tablet. "The council has overridden our security. They've locked us inside." Alexander's jaw clenched as realization struck. They're coming for her. The council's strike team breached the estate in minutes, a dozen black-clad operatives flooding the halls with silent precision. Alexander fought like a storm, blades flashing under the emergency lights. Each movement a dance of lethal grace. Naomi, caught between panic and resolve, felt the golden energy building beneath her skin, begging to be unleashed. "Don't," Seraphine yelled over the chaos, grabbing her arm. "If you lose control now, you'll take all of us with you." Naomi gritted her teeth, forcing the energy back, her body trembling violently with the effort. Then she saw him, one of the council's assassins' weapon raised, aiming directly at Alexander's back. She screamed, and the world shattered. Golden light erupted from her body in a blinding wave, slamming into the council's forces with bone-crushing force. Walls collapsed, glass exploded, and the floor split beneath their feet. Naomi stood at the center of the devastation. When the light faded, breathing hard, her veins burning with molten fire. Alexander approached her cautiously, hand extended. "Naomi," he said softly, "come back to me." But her golden gaze was distant, her voice low, strange. "I can hear them. The twins. They're awake." Later, as the survivors regrouped in the ruins of the library, Seraphine spread the decrypted prophecy across the table. She said quietly that it was never about choosing between them, tracing the spiraling symbols with her finger. Naomi frowned. "What do you mean?" Seraphine looked up, her expression pale. "The prophecy was mistranslated. It doesn't say one inherits, one destroys." Alexander leaned forward. "Then what does it say?" Seraphine's voice trembled as she read the line aloud. "Two heirs. One mind. One body." Naomi's blood ran cold. "That's impossible." "No." Seraphine whispered, her gaze locking on Naomi's. "It means they aren't two lives. They're one." The revelation crashed through the room like thunder. Naomi staggered back, clutching her stomach, her heartbeat wild. "Alexander," she whispered, shaking her head. What if the twins aren't separate? What if they're me? Before he could answer, an ear-splitting siren ripped through the estate. A transmission came through on every frequency. Delgado's voice, smooth and cold. The final stage begins. Secure the mother alive. The integration starts tonight. Naomi froze as golden light surged violently beneath her skin, hotter and brighter. And deep beneath the Syndicate's citadel, the blood pact core reached critical activation, a countdown of 7 days, flashing in burning red. 7 days, until Naomi Helix ceased to exist. 7 days until the world changed forever. 7 days. That's all the time they had before the blood pact core completed its activation, before Naomi ceased to exist, and the world bent to a fate none fully understood. Cross Estate had become a fortress. Every window was reinforced, and every hallway was lined with armed guards, loyal only to Alexander. Naomi stood by the high glass doors of the war room, staring at the holographic countdown. 6 days, 23 hours, 11 minutes. Her reflection stared back at her faint traces of golden light beneath her skin veins, like threads of fire. Alexander entered quietly, setting a steaming cup of tea beside her. "Drink," he said softly. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I lose myself before this ends?" "You won't," he said, his storm-gray gaze unshakable. "Because I won't let you." Later that night, Naomi sat cross-legged in the darkened atrium, attempting to meditate the way Seraphine had taught her. She tried to quiet the voices inside her, the whispers of thousands of lifetimes embedded in her engineered DNA, calling her towards something ancient and inevitable. One mind, one body, one destiny. Her breathing steadied, but just as she reached stillness, an image flared in her mind. 2 small hands, one drenched in sunlight, the other dripping shadow. She gasped, breaking concentration, and pressed a hand to her stomach. Alexander found her moments later and knelt before her. "Talk to me." Naomi met his gaze, emerald and gold swirling in her irises. "They're fighting," she whispered inside me. Far beneath the Syndicate's citadel, Delgado stood before the core of Project Helix, a massive sphere suspended in liquid energy, its golden glow pulsating like a living heart. His lieutenant approached cautiously. "Sir, the council has mobilized. They know you're activating the core." Delgado smiled, faintly, eyes fixed on the swirling light. "Let them come. By the time they arrive, it will be too late." Behind him, the Helix interface surged to life glyphs, unraveling ancient command symbols no human had touched for centuries. And deep within its core, Naomi's name burned brightest. Back at the estate, Seraphine returned from an infiltration mission, her face pale. "They've united," she said breathlessly. "The Council and Delgado. They've stopped fighting each other. Now they're coming for us." Alexander froze, realization striking like lightning. "They want Naomi alive, but me dead." Naomi's throat tightened, panic rising. "We can't fight both sides, Alexander. Not like this." He placed his hands firmly on her shoulders, his voice low, steady. "We won't fight them, Naomi. We'll end them." The attack came at dawn. Black-clad Syndicate operatives descended on Cross Estate from every direction through the gates, the skies and underground tunnels. Alexander led the defense, twin blades flashing silver as chaos erupted around him. Naomi tried to stay hidden in the inner chamber, but her body thrummed violently with golden power, pulsing faster with every scream, every gunshot, every drop of blood. Seraphine burst into the chamber, her eyes wild. "Naomi, you have to leave now. If they capture you, it's over." Naomi shook her head, defiance in her voice. "If I leave, everyone dies fighting for me." And then the walls exploded inward. Delgado stepped through the smoke-dark coat, billowing his expression calm, almost gentle. "Naomi," he said softly, as though greeting an old friend. "It's time." Before anyone could react, Delgado activated a device strapped to his wrist. The pendant around Naomi's neck blazed white-hot, and a surge of energy ripped through her body, lifting her off the ground. Her scream tore through the chamber as golden spirals unfurled around her, like living threads binding into her veins. "Stop it!" Alexander roared, charging Delgado, but 3 syndicate guards intercepted him, blades clashing violently. Naomi's breath came ragged, her voice breaking as she gasped, "Alexander, I can feel everything." And then her feet touched the ground softly, silently. When she opened her eyes, they were no longer green and gold. They were pure light. Seraphine pulled Naomi aside as chaos raged beyond the chamber. "Listen to me," she urged, her voice shaking. "The twins, they're not just heirs. They're a lock." Naomi frowned, breathless. "A lock?" Seraphine nodded. "The blood pact is a prison, Naomi. For centuries it's contained something ancient, something catastrophic. The twins were engineered to hold it shut forever." Naomi's heart pounded violently. "And if they're born?" Seraphine hesitated before whispering, "Then the prison breaks." Hours later, the core of Project Helix reached 90% activation. Naomi could feel it in her blood, thrumming like a war drum, louder than her heartbeat. Alexander pulled her into a side corridor, his grip firm, his voice raw. "There's one way to stop this." She stared at him, dread sinking deep. "Please don't say it." He said softly, "That if we destroy the core, you'll survive, but the twins won't." Naomi's chest constricted, her breath shallow. "I can't choose, Alexander. I can't." His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing her tears away. "Then I'll choose for you." She grabbed his wrists, shaking her head violently. "No. If you do this, you'll never forgive yourself." His voice broke low and ragged. "I'd rather live with that than lose you." By nightfall, they reached the Helix chamber. The blood-packed core floated at its center, its golden radiance blinding glyphs spiraling faster than the eye could follow. Delgado stood between them, and the core blade drawn, his expression solemn. "You're too late," he said softly. Alexander stepped forward, steel in his voice. "Not yet." Their duel was brutal, primal predator versus predator. Sparks of steel lit the air as Alexander pushed Delgado back, every strike fueled by fury and love. Meanwhile, Naomi approached the core, hands trembling, the energy inside her resonating violently with its power. Seraphine screamed from the platform above Naomi. "If you connect to it, there's no going back." Naomi whispered to herself. "Then I'll make sure no one ever suffers this again." She placed her hands on the core. The entire chamber erupted in light. Naomi's body fused with the Helix energy, her scream raw and unearthly, as memories, lifetimes, centuries, civilizations flooded her mind. She saw the origin of the pact, the birth of Project Helix, the experiments, the betrayals, and at the center of it all, herself. The pact didn't create Naomi Helix. Pact was the pact. The twins inside her weren't heirs. They were keys. They would merge if they were born together, unlocking an ancient power strong enough to remake the world. The chamber fell silent. Naomi stood at the heart of the fractured core, glowing like a living star, tears streaking her cheeks. She turned to Alexander, her voice soft but unyielding. "It's done. The pact. It's over." Delgado lay wounded on the floor, the council retreating into chaos. Alexander crossed the chamber and pulled her into his arms, holding her, as though the universe depended on it. "It's over," he whispered into her hair. But Naomi shook her head faintly. "No, it's just beginning." Sunlight spilled through the glass cathedral, where white roses lined the aisle. Naomi strolled toward Alexander, her dress flowing like starlight, her smile radiant, despite the scars of war. It wasn't just a promise between two lovers when they exchanged vows. It was a defiance of fate itself. Weeks later, in the quiet sanctuary of their new home, Naomi held two tiny bundles in her arms, a boy and a girl sleeping peacefully. Alexander leaned down, kissing her forehead. "Twins," he whispered, awe in his voice. "After everything." Naomi smiled, faintly, tears shimmering in her eyes. "After everything," she echoed. The world outside had changed forever, but in that moment, nothing mattered except them. For the first time, Naomi felt free.